Let's test this, making sure we're at recovery site, which we are. I'll open up my vSphere client, and we will log in to that local site, which is the recovery site, as SRM Joe. Okay, now we're logged in as SRM Joe to the recovery site VC. What we'll want to do first is go to site recovery section of the vSphere client. Now I want to drill down to the recovery plan and see what options we have available. Looks like I can test it, but if you look, the run option has been grayed out. So you can see that this proves that the permissions actually work, which is a good thing. Okay, so let's take a look at what you can do to set up a custom SRM role for a very specific purpose. And the purpose that I would like to propose here is that of the actual failover plan, let's say security, and who's allowed to actually run a failover. We would like anyone to be able to test this, or not just anyone, but the people allowed to test it should be able to test it anytime they want without specific approval, let's say. But to actually push that big red button and initiate a failover, that's a C-level decision. That's a major business decision. So let's pretend that we could give access to, let's say, a VP of recovery or VP of disaster recovery to initiate the pushing of the big red button. It's not necessarily a practical way to use SRM security, but I think it'll be a good way to show you what you would have to go through to edit existing roles to solve a specific security requirement for your SRM installation. So with that, let's first start with a group and a user that we want to assign this very specific recovery plan. But first I'll log out of SRM Joe's session, and we'll go to Manage Computer to take a look at the users. In my scenario, I'm using local users and groups since I don't have an Active Directory set up for simplicity's sake. If you're doing this within Active Directory, you would obviously be going into Active Directory users and computers to look up users and whatnot. So I've created a new group called Executive Decisions Group. This is a group that only has the privilege to run the recovery plan, nothing else. And within this group, I have created a single user, and I've called him VP of Recovery. Him or her, it could be a lady VP of Disaster Recovery, that's fine. Now, our goal here is to be able to have only the run button show up. No testing, no configuration of other VMs, and just enough privilege to execute the run button and then go back to their office and handle executive level communications during a disaster, let's say. So to do that, let's take a look at the roles and see which ones might fit our need the best. In this case, I think I would like to use the Recovery Plans Administrator because I was in there earlier and I could see how that would tie to the execution or the creation or the testing of recovery plans. So we'll edit that role just to make sure. And from what I know, it is under recovery plan. And there you go. Run, remove, modify, create. Sounds like this is where I want to go. I could create from scratch. However, I do like the ability to have these other roles or these other privileges included. Well, I'm going to actually cancel this and let's try it from the beginning. We'll just add a role. So we'll add a role and we'll call it recovery so that it sorts nicely. Executive run button. We'll give it the singular privilege of running a recovery plan. Now, this is where we talked about earlier. We're creating a role this specific without much testing could be an issue, right? you might be able to run the recovery plan, but there might be a whole slew of other privileges that are actually dependent that you actually need to have to function properly to even run the recovery plan. So this may or may not work, but you get the idea of creating a custom role with a specific privilege. So now that the role is created, we need to first make sure the user we want to assign the role can log into vCenter. And to do that, we go to hosts and clusters, as you remember earlier, and I'm going to add a permission. And this will be assigned to that group that we're wanting to assign the role to, which was the executive decisions group. Click OK. And read only is fine. I don't want to propagate to the child objects though, because that would allow them to read all of the inventory, and we don't want the executives to be able to see all that complexity. We want to keep it very simple. So we'll click OK, and they now have the ability to log in. Anyone in that group has the ability to log in to vCenter. They can't do much yet though, because we haven't given any other roles. So to do that, let's go to the site recovery section so that we can apply our new role that we've created. To do that, click on the site recovery at the tree, go to Permissions tab, click Add Permission, which I got to that dialog by right-clicking in the white space. We'll go ahead and click Add to add the Executive Decisions group. Double click and OK. Now we should have a role in here that we've created, and it should sort nicely under Recovery. And there it is at the very bottom, Recovery Executive Run Button. And I'll go ahead and propagate that to child objects. That's fine. We could probably create it just at the recovery level, but since this is just for the sake of demonstration, we'll leave it as is and click OK. Great. So if I select the critical recovery plan and take a look at the users and groups assigned to it, administrators are assigned, SRM admins are assigned and have a certain role. Executive Decisions group has the role that we just created, which should allow them to click the Run button. So let's test this out with the user that we added to that group, called VP of Recovery. Oh, we're logged in as VP of Recovery. You can see that there's not much there. It's just a Recovery Center VC. No read-only permissions on anything contained within it. No virtual machines, no hosts, no nothing. We can see tasks and events. But what we wanted to do is take a look at site recovery and see if it can see the recovery plan. Okay, we're at the site recovery page here. We logged in as VP of Recovery, and you can see that there's no protection groups over there. That's fine. But I can see a recovery plan, and I try to edit that, and that's all grayed out, so I can see that those options aren't available. I can't test it, pause it, resume it, stop it. But hey, guess what? The Run button is there. So it is possible that you could create a custom role to lock down a executive so that they can't see anything else, but they could come in here in the event of a disaster and run the failover. Whether it would work or not, unattended with only executive behind the wheel, that's for you to test. But more than likely, we would have a team of people with their individual permissions logged in through their vSphere clients, being able to monitor this process the whole way. So that kind of does it for showing you what's possible with access roles in SRM and the different options you have to create your own or just assign the out-of-the-box SRM roles, and at what levels you need to do that so that the appropriate permission is given to the right resources at the right level. And we also touched on the fact that don't forget to give at least read-only permission at the virtual center level so that SRM users can actually log into VC to do what they need to do within SRM. That would usually only apply to your larger orgs. where there's a specific SRM group that maybe isn't familiar with the day-to-day administration of SRM. Smaller organizations probably would have the same users doing the VMware administration doing the SRM, so you might not have a need for this level of access role, but it's good to know that it's there in case you do. And as always, don't forget to test. In a disaster recovery scenario, you don't want to have to test roles for the very first time. You want to make sure that the roles that you've created or used behave as you would expect, especially when it comes to restoring your business and restoring your livelihood and the livelihood of the others working with you. So with that, thanks, and we'll get back to the rest of this lesson. All right, let's talk about SRM logs. In your configuration of SRM and the ongoing administration, things might not always go according to plan, and Murphy's Law will happen. That's where logging is helpful to help you resolve and troubleshoot issues that you have with your environment. To find the logs for Site Recovery Manager, you'll simply need to go to the following directory location: C, Documents and Settings, All Users, Application Data, VMware, VMware vCenter Site Recovery Manager, and inside of that is a logs directory. In this will be a listing of the last couple of logs, and you can go to the latest and greatest by looking at the earliest, or actually the latest state. I like to find that log, go straight to the bottom and see what was happening right when I had an error. And you can usually figure out the parts of the log that are affecting you within a short period of time. That being said, the level of detail in there isn't necessarily the easiest for humans to read, and hopefully it could get more descriptive in the future, but it's the best available low-level tool that you have today for that type of troubleshooting. Sometimes you'll get into issues that you can't solve through your own powers of deduction or with the help of the communities or Twitter, and it's time to pull out the big guns at that point. And you'll call VMware support, and they would probably ask or request that you generate a log bundle. It's good practice to maybe know where this is in advance so that you can create it ahead of time and have it ready to submit right away. To find that, you can browse out to the script and run that script from the location here, or you can go to Start Programs and actually get to it through the Windows Start menu, which will show that later in the demo. This will contain a little bit more than just logs. It will also contain the configuration files for SRM, any core dumps if they happen to exist, as well as the entire log directory, not just the latest log. So they'll be able to see over time what was happening if they need to go back a couple days of logs. With that, let's go ahead and jump into the demo for showing you how you can generate SRM logs and where they're located. Okay, we're logged into the recovery site right now, although you could be logged into the protected site, it doesn't matter. And we're trying to generate some logs to be used for troubleshooting. If we look in the interface, there really isn't a place to go to grab the SRM logs specifically, but I will show you where you can browse out to find them. If you pull up Windows Explorer, you can actually head out to the C drive, and if you go to Documents and Settings, All Users, Application Data, VMware vCenter Site Recovery Manager, there'll be a folder called Logs. Go ahead and open Logs, and it will actually reveal here the latest and greatest log, which is this VMware-DR-41, and the zipped up logs from previous weeks and days. What I like to do is take a copy of the latest log and paste it right in that directory so I'm not editing any live files. And you can open that with Notepad. Lots of detailed information, not all of it necessarily easy to read. Where I like to to go straight to the bottom because it is in time order, so the latest and greatest stuff will be recorded here at the bottom. And if you had an error, you'd be able to see what was happening at that time. So that would be useful for your day-to-day troubleshooting of issues. However, if you needed to call VMware support and create a more complete log bundle, what you'd want to do is go to Start, All Programs, VMware, and there's a VMware vCenter Site Recovery Manager option. Inside of that is an option to generate a log bundle for Site Recovery Manager. We'll go ahead and click that. Zips through the log, and when you're done, it gives you a helpful message saying, yep, we're complete, and this is where you can find us. So I'm going to go ahead and find that location. It looks like it just threw it onto my desktop, so that should be easy. Yep, there's the only zip file I have on my desktop. I'll go ahead and open that so you can see what's inside. Just like I said earlier, we have three folders. One's a config folder, which contains configuration information on SRM, which can be useful for VMware support to troubleshoot. Could contain core dumps if SRM server is running into issues where it's locking up and having to dump memory. And the logs directory, which that should look familiar. So if there's things you don't want being shipped off to VMware support in that directory, you might want to clean them up before you create that log bundle. That's really all there is to logging with Site Recovery Manager. Fairly simple, straightforward tool so far. Hopefully it continues to expand as the product gets bigger. Most importantly in the area of descriptiveness for errors so that it's easier to pinpoint configuration issues as you're setting it up. Okay, it's time for us to cover recovery plan reporting. Recovery plan reports can be exported for each recovery plan. This is an easy way to document your SRM setup. Recovery plan test history can also be reported. This will show the success or failure of the plan steps that are executed during a recovery or recovery test. There's quite a few use cases for both types of reporting. The first is most obvious, updating documentation for your disaster recovery runbook. It's a great way to keep that thing current, up to date with the latest information. Also, documenting the success or failure of DR tests, which can help you improve or perfect those disaster recovery tests. In the past, in like a physical server environment for disaster recovery, if you're having to update that runbook, it was kind of a laborious process, right? You have to find the actual paper, you have to reprint these things. It's kind of messy. In the case of SRM, you'll find areas where you might need to tweak the configuration a little bit, whether it's inventory mappings or the order of the recovery. Once you change that order within SRM, you can just click on the button to export a new report, and it's self-documenting. So it's a real good reason for SRM, and it's a good feature you want to make sure you take care of rather than documenting this by hand. Also, compliance reporting is a good use of this feature in that you can completely automate the process of creating reports on your DR tests, and you could probably present them without much editing, although you'd probably want to make them part of a larger report. But you can just hand that report to auditors or executives and prove that you're doing testing, and you can instantly see the success or failure of those tests that you're doing. This is really a good use case for the financial industry and even small community banks that are setting up virtual machine environments at two different sites. They can use SRM between the two and do testing on a regular basis and print out this report So when they have to pass their FDIC audits, here you go, a lot easier. There's also a couple of different file formats that are supported with this export feature. You can export to the Microsoft XLS format or Excel. It supports Word docs, CSV. HTML is the default, and it's the one most typically used, and you can also use XML. So with those different file formats, it opens up your ability to automate the document creation even further. So maybe you could transfer that XLS or that XML into a completely different document that could have its own custom formatting to meet your needs. With that, let's go ahead and try a little demo of the recovery plan reporting. All right, here we are logged into the recovery site, and quick check here, local site says recovery, so you know that that's where we're at. And what I want to do is highlight the recovery plan that we have set up. The first option for exporting this is contained right here at the second icon. It says Export Recovery Plan. So I'm going to go ahead and click on that. And you can choose a location. I'm going to store this in My Documents and give it the name of Critical Server Recovery Plan Report. Click Save. It created that document, and it actually launches the browser so you can view it right away. Great way to detail exactly what you saw in the steps for that recovery plan. Shut down VMs, prepare storage. If we switch back to this, it says shut down VMs, prepare storage. It's everything in order. Great way to document your SRM environment. And if we go out to My Documents, you'll see that I have an HTML file out there. Great. So that's cool. But what about reporting on testing? To find that, you can go to the History tab and see a list of the tests that you've done in the past. I've done one earlier tonight, so you should be able to get some information on that. Over to the right, you'll see two options. We can view the steps that happened as part of the recovery test, or we can actually export. I'll do view first to show you what that does. Basically, it just pulls it up into a browser, and you could save this out if you wanted to, but this looks very familiar, right? Except it's added in some additional information to show the success or failure or any other notifications that need to happen of what happened during the recovery test and how long it took. So I'll close that. I want to actually export this because I'd like to give it to some auditors that are coming in to see our test lab environment. And for giggles, let's make it into a CSV format. Critical Server Recovery Plan. Second quarter test. And I want to do a CSV just to show you that that can be done. Once you get the file name in, click Save, and it opens it up in Notepad. Although you could copy this out and view in Excel if you needed to and edit. Basically the same information that would have been presented in HTML is now in CSV. So if you had scripts that could parse this and format it however you want and put it into another document format, you could leverage that and automate your DR reporting requirements. Well, that does it for this lesson on administering SRM. But before we go, let's review what we've learned in this lesson. First, we learned how to administer protection groups and the protected VMs. Specifically, we learned how to use VMware migration techniques to control which virtual machines get protected and which don't. We also discussed how to configure or remove protection on those virtual machines once they've been moved from the appropriate data store. We showed you protected data store administration and how to add new protected data stores to expand capacity, and some of the tricks needed to allow SRM to see these new replicated volumes, which basically meant adding a virtual machine to that newly replicated data store. We also covered how to adjust inventory mappings and troubleshoot issues related to incomplete mappings of virtual resources. We created and managed SRM alarms to keep a better handle on the configuration management of your SRM configuration. We addressed how to configure access control on your SRM servers, and we politely reminded you to get your security team involved early to help with this configuration. We overviewed SRM logging and how to use this information to troubleshoot issues or to help file logging with VMware support. And finally, we showed you how you can use the recovery plan reporting to keep DR documentation updated and your auditors surprisingly happy. And that concludes this lesson on administering SRM. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next lesson.